The Israeli Defense Forces now appear literally poised on the edge of launching their long-expected incursion into the Gaza Strip, into Gaza City. There was reports that actually footage released by the IDF last night that shows a number of tanks breaching the wall, and then a number of other armored vehicles moving through inside the strip, and then attacking several locations on the side of the border. It appears that they were going in there to either destroy some of the forward Hamas positions or to get some last minute reconnaissance. But usually this is done right before you're going to bring in your primary force. And given that they made a breach in that wall, that's probably where some of it would come from. And it's some reports that have come into me from some other sources say that apparently the chances are high that this can start this very night, just hours from now. So everything depends on what happens in the aftermath of this. But as bad as things have been since October the 7th, both for the Israeli people as well as the Palestinian people and all the responses up to this point, things could get a lot worse now. And there's a lot of risk for Israel, for the region, and the United States. And I want to give you a little bit of a deeper dive here that maybe you're not getting on other channels, because a lot of people are talking about what's happening, but I'm going to give you some information about the meaning behind some of this. Now, we had actually earlier today on Fox News, a spokesman for the IDF who actually gave a little bit more about their preparations.
Our operation is dependent on two components. First of all, the government decision. The government needs to instruct us to mobilize. Indeed, we heard Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday when he addressed the Israeli public, and he said he's working in order to gain that consensus in his government. And from our perspective, that is only one condition. The second condition, of course, would be the optimal operational conditions for the IDF. We're not in a rush. We realize this is a long battle ahead of us. And therefore, we're taking our time. Every day that goes by, we're more professional, better prepared, better equipped, and the tasks, the specific tasks of the individual units are more clear in how they fit together in the broader picture, the broader puzzle of dismantling Hamas. So while there's ongoing debates and discussions on the diplomatic level, our role is to be prepared to move in when those two conditions are met.
Now, we have information just, again, hours ago, and after that broadcast was made, that apparently Netanyahu has said that the political decisions have been made. They said they had unanimous decision by the war cabinet. So apparently that half of the equation has been met. Now, the question is, has the military component, are they also prepared and ready? And based on that incursion this morning, it seems like if they're not there, they're right now. Now, as you know, if you've been watching our channel here, I've been advocating and suggesting that Israel should take even longer time to get the military ready. Many of the things he cited in there, that military spokesman, about what they can continue to do by training and preparation, get the equipment that they need, stockpile all the supplies that they would need, ammunition to sustain combat, because he's right. This is not going to be quick, easy, or painless. And in fact, I believe it was earlier today, one of the Hamas spokesmen made a comment about how ready they are. And, he said, look, this pretty chilling statement, he said there, we have readied our men who love death for the sake of Allah just as much as you love life. So I think that that's consistent with what we've seen out of Hamas so far. And I think that they absolutely mean that, which means that they are not afraid of what's to come. I think most of them know that they're not going to survive, and that doesn't cause them any problem. They are ready to fight. Now, it's also important that in that same article where that came from, that the Hamas side is claiming that they have a number of surprises ready for the IDF, that some weapon systems that they haven't employed yet. And of course, as you know, we've talked about it a lot here as well, probably booby traps, other kinds of unexpected things that are going to pop out of nowhere through the tunnels, or even from buildings or from adjacent buildings. There's going to be a lot of trouble for it. But the bottom line is, this is going to be a very, very difficult fight. So nobody should expect any kind of quick response from this. Now, the bigger concern I have right now is what could happen around this. Now, there have been a number of states in the region that are friends and allies of the United States. And there has been a lot of anger on the Arab street. Now, a lot of that's not completely new because we see that there's been, many times protests in the Middle East there. But these are starting to get larger and larger and putting the governments that are our friends, that have been our friends of Israel, in a little bit more difficult position. You have, for example, Egypt. Al-Sisi actually despises Hamas almost as much as Israel does, because they are remnants of the Muslim Brotherhood, which he helped to depose when he came to power, and the previous government was friends with. So he doesn't want to bring them, anything out, and he would be fine if they got destroyed. But the people in Egypt have been allowed to very rare opportunity to protest in large numbers against the treatment of the Palestinian people. Likewise, in Saudi Arabia, they have been making some pretty strong statements at the government level, and lots of anger at the person level, the civilian level, against the Israeli government and against what's happening to the Palestinian people. And we also had in Jordan, King Hussein, who's been one of the longest friends of the United States in the area. He said this:
anywhere else attacking civilian infrastructure and deliberately starving an entire population of food, water, electricity, and basic necessities would be condemned. Accountability would be enforced immediately, unequivocally.
So right now, it's just a bunch of anger, but everything hinges on what happens after the IDF goes in there, because that could trigger a number of other actions. We already know that this so-called axis of resistance, which includes Iran, Syria, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and several other Islamic jihadi groups throughout the region, Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, for example. They have claimed that if Israel goes in there on the ground, then they are going to get involved and potentially open up a northern front against Israel there, and potentially U.S. troops could come into harm's way. Now, we have American forces, roughly 1,000 or so in Syria, and we have another large number, relatively large number, in Iraq. And they are very vulnerable to potential of these people, because they're right there in the middle, almost like in the middle of the beehive. And those troops could come under attack if Israel attacks, especially if the U.S. gets involved against Hezbollah in the north. Now, President Biden was asked that at a press conference just yesterday, and he said this:
we have had troops in the region since 9/11 to go after ISIS and prevent its reemergence in both, anyway, in the region, having nothing to do with Israel at all. My warning to the Ayatollah was that if they continue to move against those troops, we will respond, and he should be prepared. It has nothing to do with Israel.
It doesn't have anything to do with Israel, but it does have to do with Israel, and it definitely has to do with us, because we are supporting Israel. And a lot of the Arab and Muslim populations in the Middle East are saying, okay, U.S., you're giving them ammunition, you're giving them weapons, and you're giving them cover, so you're just as guilty as they are. So it's entirely possible that the United States could be targeted as a result of what's going on. Even if the U.S. doesn't directly go after the Hezbollah, for example, if they don't come in, it's still possible that our troops could come under attack. And in fact, we have in recent days, just within the last 24 hours, quite a number of American troops were attacked in Iraq and in Syria, in both places. And we had troops that suffered traumatic brain injuries. Thank God none were killed. And again, is just let one of those troops be killed in this process, and there's going to be a strong requirement and push among the American people, certainly among Congress, to respond in kind, not just to the groups that did it, but to their boss in Iran, because the assumption is that Iran would be directing them. And whether they are, whether they are not, who knows? But Iran is warning against any direct involvement by the United States against them. They're saying that they're going to stay out of the war unless they are directly attacked. So if our troops are attacked by some of these proxy forces, and then we retaliate directly against Iran, now all of a sudden you could have a huge conflagration and a huge war in there. Now, listen, let me just point out that there is some real risk for the United States here, not just combat here, but almost one of the few tools that Tehran has to really strike back at the United States is to first of all potentially go after our shipping in the region, because they have a lot of potential small boat craft that can swarm tactics. They have some drones. They can mine the Strait of Hormuz. They can launch long-range missiles even into Israel, and certainly against our troops in Syria and Iraq. So there's some things they can do if they're attacked. And that would be really, really bad for America and our interest. Further, if Israel goes on with this incursion and all of a sudden it starts to bog down or take a long time, but the casualties to these Palestinian civilians, if that continues to mount up, and I believe the latest number I heard was about 8,000 has been reported as being killed so far. And if that number starts skyrocketing, we don't know what these governments in the region are going to do if that starts to happen, because if their populations start to get too angry, then even though the governments may be sympathetic to us and want to continue to maintain relations, they may be forced, because of problems within their own countries, to take action here. Potentially they could embargo their oil, for example. They could stop selling it to the West. We've had that before. And of course, immediately that would cause catastrophic impact to our national security through our economy, because if the price of oil would just go through the roof, and then everything else would follow behind that. And our economy is already a little bit rickety, and it wouldn't take too much of a jolt to shock us into potentially a recession. So there's things that there are things implicated here that are beyond just the battlefield that directly affect our interest. So it is in America's interest to make certain and encourage Israel in the strongest terms that they need to make this a very limited, targeted engagement, that they need to do better than they have and really try and protect the Palestinian civilians. They cannot afford. I mean, if you take the morality out of it, which I don't, I think that it's morally an obligation to protect the civilian population who were guilty of nothing, and they should not be subjected to just wanton attacks like they have been. But it's a military imperative that if Israel doesn't want to gain more enemies, they've got to take better care of the civilians in that area there. Again, let me reiterate and stress, as I have many times, Hamas conducted horrific terrorist strikes against the innocent civilian population in Israel, and they deserve the full stop to be attacked and destroyed for what they did. They do. Because there's no justification at all for what happened there. There's many things that were, building up trouble and difficulties in the region, both within Israeli society and between the Israelis and the Palestinians, especially in the West Bank in the year leading up to this. And that's something that we can discuss at a future time. But even that does not justify what Hamas did. So it is appropriate for Israel to respond. It is not appropriate for them to respond too great, to where people who were also innocent suffer in the response, in the retaliation. It is in America's interest. We have to get this under control, and we have to make sure this does not spread beyond. Now, we're going to continue to keep you up to date. This could, as I said, this could continue to unfold literally hours from now. We're going to be here with you. We're going to continue to give you not just the news of what happens, but the implications for America and things beyond the headlines that you're probably not going to get in other places. So like and subscribe and set that marker so that you get notified when this comes up, because I want to make sure that you're aware when it's happening, and share this with your friends. Anybody that wants to also know what's happening in the real story and not just a slanted one way or the other, Deep Dive is going to give it to you. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.